It is clear that this can now only be described as a terrorist attack.
Scenes of bloody violence playing out in 2 New Zealand mosques.
Everybody just run toward the back doors just to save themselves. I don't know how many people died.
It's the deadliest massacre the country has ever witnessed.
The total number of people who have died in this horrendous event are 49.
And tonight, Catholic leaders around the globe are speaking out. Currents News has team coverage right now. Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Faublas. Houses of prayer and peace were grotesquely transformed into places of horror and death today in New Zealand. One suspect is being charged with murder. Others are in police custody. A holy day of worship desecrated by gunfire. At least 49 people are dead and 48 others hospitalized in the New Zealand city of Christchurch. A self-proclaimed racist claiming responsibility for the slaughter of innocents. New Zealand's Prime Minister describing the attack as an unprecedented act of violence and one of New Zealand's darkest days.
Many of those who will have been directly affected by this shooting may be migrants to New Zealand. They may even be refugees here. They have chosen to make New Zealand their home, and it is their home. They are us.
Authorities have arrested 28-year-old Brenton Tarrant, an Australian citizen with ties to white nationalists. He's charged with murder and was expected to appear in a Christchurch courtroom on Saturday morning. 2 other suspects have also been detained. A number of firearms were recovered at the scene of the shootings, and 2 explosive devices were found in one vehicle. New Zealand police say attacks on the Masjid Al-Noor Mosque and the Linwood Masjid Mosque were well planned and strategic. The blueprint of the gunmen's intentions outlined in a hate-filled 86-page manifesto filled with anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim rants.
So the total number of people who have died in this horrendous event are 49.
The horrifying attacks were carried out as worshipers were gathering for Friday prayers, or Juma, which means Day of Assembly in Arabic. One witness who was inside the mosque when the gunfire erupted said he heard the gunmen continuously shooting for 10 to 15 minutes. Other survivors described the terrifying moments before shots rang out.
We heard, the firing, and it was from the main entrance of the building. And then everybody just run toward the back doors just to save themselves. And first we hide behind the cars and, under the cars. And then when we see that firing is still on, we try to, jump the fence.
I see the people, they're shooting from inside the mosque. And at the time of jumping and then run away, they just keep firing.
In an outpouring of support for the victims and the citizens of New Zealand, the Vatican releasing a statement saying the Pope is, quote, deeply saddened to learn of the injury and loss of life caused by the senseless acts of violence. He assures all New Zealanders, and in particular the Muslim community, of his heartfelt solidarity in the wake of these attacks. President Trump tweeting 49 innocent people have so senselessly died, with so many more seriously injured. The U.S. stands by New Zealand for anything we can do. The racist manifesto, entitled The Great Replacement, lays out the alleged gunman's motive, including a mission to avenge, quoting here, thousands of deaths caused by foreign invaders. The shooter also indicating he wanted to create conflict and divisiveness by choosing guns as a method of killing.
These are people who I would describe as having extremist views that have absolutely no place in New Zealand and, in fact, have no place in the world.
That was New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. We will, of course, continue to monitor events as they develop and bring you the latest as the country struggles to make sense of this senseless attack. Meantime, reaction pouring in from around the world. In addition to the Pope, Brooklyn Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio is saying, I strongly denounce the horrific acts at the 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, which were aimed at immigrants and people of faith. On behalf of all Catholics within the Diocese of Brooklyn, I offer my prayers for those who have perished and who have been injured in these mass shootings. This is an unsettling reminder that the right to religious freedom is under attack throughout the world in nations that allow their citizens to worship the God they believe in. Heavily armed New York Police Department anti-terror officers were mobilized in the immediate aftermath of the New Zealand massacre. They've been posted at mosques and other key sites across the city. Despite the security deployment, the NYPD is saying there are no known threats. Governor Andrew Cuomo has ordered state police to increase patrols around mosques and other houses of worship across the state. And he also said, at a time of great division, we will stand up to hate in all its forms. New York is home to more than 700,000 Muslim Americans. Several of them expressed their disbelief over what happened in New Zealand.
We are the human being, whatever worship or this is not matter.
I know the world is like a lot of crazy people, a lot of good people also. It's not matter any color or any religion or anything. Could be bad people from everywhere, every color, every religion.
New Yorkers also told Currents News they feel safe at their places of worship within New York. Police departments across America are tightening security at mosques and other sensitive locations. The White House is closely monitoring these developments. Karen Kafa reports the latest from Washington.
From New York to Chicago and Los Angeles, an abundance of caution at mosques across the country after a deadly terror attack in New Zealand.
We have obviously a police presence in all mosques around the city. We'll continue to have patrols.
The Department of Homeland Security said there is no credible threat to the U.S., but officials are remaining vigilant and sending condolences.
The thoughts and prayers of the American people are with the victims and their families today. The United States condemns this hateful assault.
At least 49 people were killed, more injured in two mass shootings at two mosques in Christchurch. New Zealand is in mourning.
Clearly, what has happened here is an extraordinary and unprecedented act of violence.
President Trump tweeting his warmest sympathy to the people of New Zealand. His national security advisor, John Bolton, pledging the U.S. will help as needed.
We're going to cooperate with the New Zealand authorities to the extent we can. If there's any role that we can play, but we're obviously following the events there very closely.
The Council on American Islamic Relations condemning the attack and urging Muslims here in the U.S. not to shy away from worship out of fear.
We tell our community, do not be afraid and do not abandon your mosques. Not today, not ever.
In Washington, Karen Kafa, Currents News.
Terror against holy places has left a bloody trail around the world, with at least 25 assaults in the last decade, including the October 2010 attack against Our Lady of Salvation Catholic Church in Baghdad. 53 people died. 6 people were killed by white supremacist Wade Michael Page at the Sikh Temple of Wisconsin in August 2012. 9 parishioners and their pastor were shot to death in June 2015 by Dylan Roof at South Carolina's Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. And in 2017, 26-year-old Devin Kelly opened fire at the First Baptist Church of Sutherland Springs, Texas, killing 26 people. Last October, 11 people lost their lives at the Tree of Life Congregation Synagogue in Pittsburgh, and in January, 2 suicide bombers attacked a Roman Catholic cathedral in the Philippines, killing 23 people there. The suspected killer reportedly targeted New Zealand because it would show nowhere in the world was safe. Currents News' Michelle Powers reports Muslims in the nation have a long history of living in peace.
Today, Christchurch, a stark contrast to the sanctuary Muslim believers have called home for the last 150 years.
I never could believe that something like this would ever happen in the city of Christchurch.
The very first Muslims who arrived in New Zealand settled there in 1854. The very city history now records as the location of the island nation's deadliest attack comes as a shock to many.
I've been describing the mosque in some respects as like the friendly neighborhood, the friendly neighbor.
Since the 1990s, Muslim migration has accelerated to New Zealand. In a country of nearly 5 million people, more than 46,000 identify as Muslim. According to the 2013 census, that's up nearly 30% from 2006. Compared to other religions, Muslims make up less than 2% of the population in New Zealand. According to census data, almost half of the population identifies as Christian, though actual church attendance is closer to 15%. With increased immigration in recent years, a growing number of citizens do not identify with any religion.
This attack reminds us of the evil that is ever present and would seek to strike out at any time.
Leaders from across Australia and New Zealand were quick to denounce the massacre and apparent hate against migrants.
These are people who I would describe as having extremist views that have absolutely no place in New Zealand and, in fact, have no place in the world.
Just last year, New Zealand had announced it would lift its refugee quota, and it was also in the process of settling groups of 20 refugees from Afghanistan and Eritrea in Christchurch every 8 weeks. New Zealand is known for its low levels of gun violence and reputation for tolerance and safety. Investigators believe this is why suspect Brenton Tarrant picked the country. In a manifesto they believe to be his, the author writes about how an attack there would show that nowhere in the world was safe. The invaders were in all of our lands, even in the remotest areas of the world, and that there was nowhere left to go that was safe and free from mass immigration. According to police figures, the death toll from Christchurch is greater than the total number of homicides in the country for 2017. New Zealand's gun ownership rate has risen in the past decade to become one of the highest in the world. According to Gun Policy, a firearm prevention group, the total number of guns held by civilians rose by more than 60% in the last decade. The number of guns privately owned by civilians is estimated to be 1.5 million. Michelle Powers, Currents News.
And there's a lot more news headed your way. A border breach caught on camera. What happened after dozens of migrants broke into the U.S.? Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio is here to discuss the impact of the Vatican Summit for the Protection of Minors and Pope Francis's action plan. Plus, a celebration to kick off St. Patrick's Day at a Catholic academy in Brooklyn with a very appropriate name. And do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@thesalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. President Trump vetoed a bipartisan bill from Congress that opposed his declaration of a national emergency on the southern border.
Today I am vetoing this resolution. Congress has the freedom to pass this resolution, and I have the duty to veto it, and I'm very proud to veto it. And I'm very proud, as I said, of a lot of Republican senators that were with me.
Trump had issued the emergency decree to fund his border wall. There does not appear to be sufficient votes in Congress to override the president's veto. At the border wall that does exist, a breakout when migrants rush through an opening that they created. The breach caught on camera. Travis Rice has that report.
They crossed the border! They crossed the border! Chat, they crossed the border!
A run for the border caught on camera.
It's crazy. I didn't know this was going to happen on live stream.
Video shows groups of migrants breach the wall.
I see all these caravan members. I'm like, whoa, what's going on?
YouTuber Andy Martin was live streaming in Tijuana Thursday afternoon when it all went down.
And they all have like a scissor, and they start like cutting the fence thing off. I'm like, wait, what's going on?
Mexican Andy, as he's known online, says it was shocking to witness.
And then they cut it, and people just start running. I'm like, why are these guys running for it? It looked painful because like one of them were like overweight, so one of them actually managed to get in. I'm like, oh, that's gotta hurt. And they ran. Like, oh, they're all just running.
Martin says the lone agent at the fence could only do so much before radioing for support.
I think it did overwhelm. I mean, they couldn't do anything. But then the Border Patrol had to call for backup, and they had like all budget like 3 ATVs or whatever they're called. They have those. I think they stopped all of them.
Border Patrol says 2 separate groups rushed the border at the same time Thursday. Agents arrested 53 people and do not believe anyone got away.
For me, it was sad because with the young people running with kids in there.
Analina Duarte was rolling on the incident from Mexico and says she has a feeling we're gonna see more of this.
Everybody from South America, and they communicate and come more and more and start crossing every time. So I don't think this is going to stop. Something is the government have to do.
Border Patrol agents say the migrants told them they were mostly from Honduras. Catholic bishops in the United States and Mexico are voicing strong opposition to the Trump administration's policy on asylum seekers. Right now, people seeking protection must stay in Mexico while a court determines their fate. The bishops argue that action undermines migrants' rights to seek asylum. The Vatican Summit on the Protection of Minors made history when Pope Francis laid out an action plan to the world's bishops. Bishop DiMarzio is with Ed Wilkinson to discuss the meeting's impact in this week's edition of Into the Deep. Hi, Ed.
Thanks, Liz. Bishop DiMarzio is here to talk to us today about the recent Vatican Summit on the sexual abuse crisis in the church. And Bishop, it's been a couple of weeks now since the Vatican Summit. A lot of people were hoping for more concrete things to come out of the summit, and maybe they felt a little disappointed at the end. Was that expecting too much?
Well, it might have been because it's the whole world there. But the Holy Father, with his 21 points, I thought it was very concrete. That was, if they have to again be applied in every country, which is a little different. Just take one example that in some countries, our own, you're innocent to proven guilty. In other places, this is exactly the opposite. You're guilty until proven innocent. If someone denounces you to the public authorities, you could be put in prison until you can prove you're innocent. So it's a big difference around the world. It's not the same kind of things that happen every place. Totalitarian countries would be much different. So again, they're very specific. I don't say they're general guidelines, they're very specific things, except that they are going to be applied differently in various settings.
Yeah. In the beginning of this crisis back in 2002, a lot of bishops at the Vatican were saying this is an American problem. Do you think the people are finally getting the idea that this is a global problem? This is not just
It seems that way. I think people have recognized that this is not just a Western problem more than a Europe and the United States, and that the solutions that the United States has come up with really covers most of those 21 points. Some of them were a little more difficult to implement, but most of them we already are doing. So it was, I think, a good meeting in that sense.
When we talk about zero tolerance, I mean, it's something that I guess the Holy Father didn't really bring up, and they were hoping to hear from him. What does zero tolerance mean, and what does that mean to us?
He brought up the point of proportionality. So the crime has that proportional punishment. Unfortunately, zero tolerance does not allow that. The way our charter is defined is very, very critical, very difficult. I remember during the meeting of 2002 in Dallas, I happened to be alone in the elevator with the nuncio at that time, Montalvo, Archbishop Montalvo, and he says, you know what you bishops have just done? You can have a priest lose his priesthood for kissing a girl. And that's so true, because it's any offense against the Sixth Commandment. Now, not every offense against the Sixth Commandment. That might be if the girl didn't want to be kissed, but is that something where somebody loses their priesthood over it? There's other disciplines that you could apply to that. Right now, we don't have any leeway. Our hands are tied. It is absolute zero tolerance.
So what does that mean? So when a case comes into the diocese before you, what does that mean to you?
Well, if that's something like that happens, you have no choice but to act on it. Again, you go to the review board, and they advise me on it, but the guidelines are fairly clear. Now, if it didn't happen, to something else. But when something does happen, there is little leeway. Again, for laicization, it would have to rise to a level of a crime against the Sixth Commandment, which is much different than any offense. And that's something I think we need to define. The bishops have been reticent to do that because people say, well, you're not doing zero tolerance anymore. Well, what does zero tolerance of what? That's the key thing, has to be defined better. The present system we have could be well used, where we have the reporting line. So they take reports that any cleric or anybody actually in the diocese who's accused can go to that line, and it's
So do you think that the Vatican and bishops around the world can look to what the American bishops have done so
I think
far to find their solutions?
Most of what we've done could be applied universally, but not everything.
Okay, Bishop, thanks for shedding some light on it. Liz, coming back to you.
All right, thank you, Ed and Bishop DiMarzio. The bishop has an entire column about the Pope's 21 points in the current edition of the tablet. Catholic leaders in England and Wales are welcoming an increase in the number of people declaring their hope to become Catholics at Easter. More than 1,000 people took part in special ceremonies at cathedrals and churches across the two nations on Sunday. In comparison, the Brooklyn Diocese held the same Sunday service, and nearly 1,100 people from Brooklyn and Queens took part in that. Sunday is St. Patrick's Day. The famous Fifth Avenue Parade in his honor will kick off tomorrow, but students at a Catholic academy in Bay Ridge, well, they're starting today. Currents News' Tim Harfman has their story.
It's a St. Patrick's Day celebration at the Brooklyn Catholic Academy bearing the name of the 5th century saint.
He's patron saint of Ireland.
At St. Patrick Catholic Academy in Bay Ridge, Irish eyes smile as students step dance and sing along to traditional Irish music. But the day is filled with more than just singing and dancing. Before the festivities, students attend a special mass to honor St. Patrick, known for converting the Irish to Catholicism, baptizing thousands into the church, and leading Ireland to becoming a mostly Catholic country. Father Greg McElhenney ministers to Catholics at the Bay Ridge Church and has a special challenge for the students.
St. Patrick had a deep devotion of prayer to God, and that's how we increase our lives. So I'm challenging the kids this Lenten season to grow in that love of God and to be more like St. Patrick.
Some students accept the challenge, literally, dressing up as the saint for a look-alike contest.
St. Patrick was a priest, then a bishop, then he taught Ireland about religion, and the king let him build churches everywhere.
He taught people about there's 3 people in the 3 of Clovo.
And who are they?
I'm holding right now.
And who are they?
The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
The contest ends in a tie. For these students, it's a celebration of fun and faith. In Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
And please stay with us. We'll be right back with a final look at our top story, the mosque massacre in New Zealand. Updating the New Zealand massacre story in the worst terror attack in the country's history. Gunfire at 2 mosques in the city of Christchurch has left at least 49 people dead. A suspect has been charged with murder. He's a self-identified racist. We leave you tonight with some heartbreaking images from New Zealand on this dark day, one that will be forever remembered. Our hearts, thoughts, and prayers are with all New Zealanders. I'm Liz Faublas.